Donald Rumsfeld, Secretary of State in America, once talked about the known unknowns and then the unknown unknowns, and everybody thought he was talking gibberish. In a sense, what did we know this time last year? We certainly, or at least a lot of us, maybe you here in Croatia or in the countries in the East knew exactly what was going to happen, but the rest of the world seemed completely oblivious to the fact that Russia were going to invade Ukraine. It's an incredible place to be. And all of that meant that the geopolitical situation in one day changed. Those of you who are more expert in this area and who live in this area know I probably could have foretold that 6 years ago. But somehow we were completely shocked and surprised. And in one event, the geopolitical situation has changed. It has not alone changed in terms of our relationship with Russia, with obviously China, and even the US. It's changed within the relationships within the EU, and also the possibility of how we will manage enlargements from now on. Because we now have to ask ourselves the question, in this new situation, which is still not resolved, what sort of EU are we going to have? How many more members will join, and how many members will stay with the very strong principles of freedom, equality, inclusion? Because those are qualities which link to fundamental rights. And Europe is the only, in my opinion, I'm biased because I am a European, it is the only place where these values are put above and beyond anywhere else. Even in the paragon of democracy, the United States, we're seeing problems and questions about their democracy. And it's amazing in that election and in that coming election, the main issue could be the future of democracy. Can you imagine? So in Europe, the geopolitical situation has radically changed. I came across an article in The Economist in 2020, and it said, the move to a new energy order is vital, but it will be messy. What a prescient statement. In 2020, some people thought things are all wrong. 72% dependency on Russia. Then we have other dependencies all outside of Europe on batteries, on wind turbines, on oil, on gas. So Europe has suddenly discovered it is not in a good place. And historically, and those of you who know your history will know, access to resources is the prime ingredient to ensuring that populations, communities and people have the right kind of access to good treatment, freedom and democracy. Our access is demonstrably poor. And we now have to go into the situation where we have a lot of pain to take on while we manage to change that. And you already heard the communications member in the EU from Croatia saying this morning, this is what we have to do. Careful how we use our cars, our dryers, our electricity, careful how we live. It's an extraordinary place to be, but that's where we are, and we may have to deal with giving that leadership within the EU that the prize here is the protection of EU democracy and values while we sort out where and how we're going to manage those resources that we need access to. That is a huge challenge. In June, the EESC adopted a second resolution on Ukraine, which I was one of the co-writers, along with Stefano and Oliver from the other groups, the other group presidents. We really talked about membership candidate status. However, the resolution stated that the candidate status be granted without detriment to ongoing accession process of the Western Balkans. And that's a very sensitive issue because we do have to manage the Western Balkans in a very careful and sensitive way. We're lucky in our group, civil society organizations, to have excellent experts. Christian Pervalescu is already here from Romania, and others who manage this for us. But now it's right there up front, and we really need to manage it in a proper and honest way. But remember, Europe can only take members who fulfill the criteria of democracy. Otherwise we develop a Europe with enemies within, and we do not need that either. We have to be consistent. So, in other words, in that opinion, we ask that the conditions of candidature are clear and transparent, that they fulfill the obligations to fundamental rights, to law, to the management of poverty and access to services, to equality. That is absolutely essential. Otherwise, EU loses the reason it exists. In fact, recently, Mr. Michel, President of the European Council of Europe, said he looked at the more gradual, phased-in integration of candidate countries. And I wonder what you, the panel, will say to that. How do we manage that process? You will probably give a lot more wisdom than I am in terms of how do we manage this extraordinary geopolitical situation. Mr. Šefčovič, our Commissioner, said at our own plenary, to maintain EU's social market economy, we must be within 3 top global economies. That's ambition. That's a Europe that's not just looking to be inclusive and equal, but it's looking to exercise itself and put itself in a place where it has the power to deal with the kind of aggression we've seen, sadly, from Russia. That aggression will never go away. And as another great man, Churchill, said, we learn nothing from history. And heavens above, we have learned nothing from a World War II. And it's quite sad that that is the case. So what is the new geopolitical situation going to be like? It's about creating novel structures to deal with the new security reality. We can't back away from that reality. We are vulnerable. It's about managing the infrastructure in terms of food security, in terms of the free movement of people. Defence, energy, all of those are suddenly, whether we like it or not, on the agenda. And that is going to challenge the EU in a way that I believe will either make it or break it. So, my friends, this morning I've expressed my views. I hope my colleagues in civil society organisations will find similarity, that these are also our organisations' views. I've focused on the energy, I've focused on enlargement, the new European geopolitical community. Democracy, without the first part of it, demos, has no place in Europe. Theocracy, in other words, is our enemy. We have to have democracy. We have to have inclusion. We have to have fundamental rights and freedom as our main fundamental value. I wish you well, panel, and thank you very much for listening to me.